Thank you. As Jacob mentioned, we will do a live Q&A, and we hope you take the opportunity to submit your questions either online or verbally. I'm going to turn the floor over to John Laswick, who will cover any hot topics. John?
Thanks, Jenny. Let's have David Nagara here with me and Hunter Kurtz. And we are doing our occasional open forum, which hopefully allows you to ask questions that maybe aren't specific to some of the other webinar topics that we have. So we do have a couple of items that we just wanted to hit first to let you know what we're up to and what you might be seeing out of our office in the next couple of months. We've been working closely with our field staff and with Yolanda Chavez and Stan Gimon and Jesse Hanforth-Combe, our superiors, who are all focused on the expenditure deadlines that are coming up for every NSP grantee in the next few months, February and March. February for all the NSP2s and more or less March for the NSP1, 100% expenditures, and NSP3, 50% expenditures. So Yolanda asked me to specifically mention that we are taking these expenditure deadlines seriously and that we will recapture funds, so that we understand that maybe you're hoping that doesn't happen, but I don't think we could really encourage you to think that way, and she wants you very specifically discourage you from thinking that way. So in that regard, we have developed some lists of priority communities that we are concerned about in terms of spending rates being slow. We have done different sort of takes on how we might predict which grantees are going to come up short. We have settled on a method in which we are looking at recent expenditures over the last 3 months and sort of applying that average monthly rate to the number of months, 6 or 7, that remain, and then trying to figure out who's going to come up with a balance. We recognize that's not a perfect method. We recognize that none of these estimation methods is perfect, but the point of our doing this is to identify grantees that might need help, and we really want to do that soon because it will become too late to really help you if we let this go much farther. So you will probably be contacted, or you may be contacted by your field office, NSP staff, or CPD directors, or other people who are following up on our first group of 92 NSP 1 and 2 grantees. As I said, we don't expect that everybody needs to be on that list, and we will cross people off that list if we can see that things are in good shape. We just had a case out in Arizona just yesterday that one of the grantees got a major draw. It was a problem, and that changed their whole situation around to the point where they're close to 90% expended, whereas a week ago they looked pretty far down the list. So those kinds of things will happen, and we are thrilled to take people off the list. On the other hand, if you don't get a call and you're feeling worried, or you've got a problem that you just can't make any headway against, please call us or write into the Resource Exchange and say you need some help with marketing or financing or whatever it might be. We have a lot of TA providers that can help you out, and this is the time to get that help. NSP3 in particular looks pretty dismal as far as percentages go. We're hoping that the fact that the grants are reasonably small will make up for that, but it's a concern all the way around. So we have a Priority 1 list, which is NSP 1 and 2 grantees, a Priority 2 list, which is NSP 3 grantees, and then a Priority 3 list, which is 1, 2, and 3 grantees with a smaller projected balances. Those are going to change over time, and we hope that those lists are going to get smaller on their own, but we realize everybody's got to work hard. So we're trying to support you on that. We've all been through this before, NSP1 obligation deadline, NSP2 50% expenditure deadline. It's not fun, particularly, and we're going to be doing it with the entire universe this time, so it's going to, I think, put some strain on people, so best to get out ahead of that curve and get your spending up to speed. It would remind you that the expenditures that we count for the expenditure deadline are not the DRGR draw figures. We use the DRGR draw numbers because they tend to be more current, but they're not as exact as expenditures which are reported in the QPR. So you really need to be looking at those numbers, updating them, and putting them on a temporary, sort of a draft status for your next submission in October, so that both your accomplishment data, which is starting to improve, and your expenditure data are accurate and up to date and correct, so that when we get to the deadline, you'll know and we'll know that you made it. So don't rely on the drawdowns. I think we ran into a little problem with the the NSP2s last time, and so we're just giving everybody a heads up with expenditures that it's the QPR that matters. So let's see. I guess one other thing is following up on a comment that someone made as a observation on one of the evaluation forms from a previous webinar. They said something to the effect that, well, we talked about the issue, but we didn't get quite far enough into the details to really explain all the intricacies of it. And I think that given the format here with a webinar and 112 participants at this moment, we are not able to get that far into any given project or any given set of circumstances. It's just not fair to everyone else. But if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling like, man, I have this problem, and I wish they'd just talk for 5 more minutes about it, maybe they'd solve it, that's when you need to call in for technical assistance. That's when you need to call in. We can get people turned around to you on the phone for 6 to 16 hours within a week, basically. So there's just no reason not to reach out for help. And please understand that we try to take it as far as we can on these calls, but we're trying to balance it out for the good of the whole as well. So one other point I wanted to make is that we recently issued a policy on combined loan-to-value ratios, and it was an outgrowth of the FHA discussion that we had. Yolanda wanted us to keep it brief. It is very brief on that point. The way we define conventional financing, where this would be allowed, is that there is a private first mortgage. Now, that was intended to include FHA insurance, FHA-insured projects, and we will make that correction, but I don't want anybody to think that we were trying to leave off FHA insurance as another source of financing that could go over 100%, because there is an underlying private first mortgage there. Conventional loans have sort of varying definitions, and so it's kind of hard to settle on one and have it mean the perfect thing for everyone. But we appreciate Pat Selmer straightening us out on that. And so for those of you who are relying on FHA, keep using that, and you're not limited to the 100% loan to value. We are just looking primarily for that first mortgage lender, that third-party lender, to be doing the underwriting that would allow a person to get into that situation without being threatening to their credit position. So those are all the kind of main points that I had. We appreciate you all calling in from your vacations and whatnot, and I'm sure you're sitting by the pools right now, so try to keep those martinis from clinking too much when you call in with your questions, and I guess we can open up the lines and see if anybody's written in or called in yet.
Okay. Well, it looks like we do have 2 written questions at the moment. The first one comes from Joanna, And the question is, can demolition be included as part of the 50% expenditure for NSP3?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's any project that you have, any activity that you've got, and 50%. So, I mean, you might have one project that takes 50% of your program.
Depending on scale.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like you got to have everything half done. You just have to spend half the money, and whatever makes the most sense. I mean, demolition is a fairly straightforward undertaking compared to lining up multifamily, financing for new construction, for example. So, absolutely, you can do that.
Okay, great. The second one is from Kyle. We have 2 homes purchased through NSP1 that require extensive repairs and have been determined they should be demolished and rebuilt. Our schedule to get these homes done by March is tight. What happens if our schedule gets compromised?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's really any alternative to having a backup plan or, another project maybe that can take you over, because if your only project, I mean, if the only thing you have falls short, then there is no kind of alternative at that point but for us to look at the recapturing funds. So some grantees have program income that they could spend on something that's more of a sure thing to get that expenditure number up. You only have to spend an amount that's equal to 50% or 100% of your grant amount. If you have program income, that means you actually have more than 100%, and so maybe you can, swap out a new straightforward project for while you're doing the complicated older project.
There is a follow-up question from Kyle. It says, as a follow-up, these 2 homes need to be occupied by 50% AMI to meet their requirements. When do they need to be living in the homes?
Right. Well, that's an easier question. So you have to expend the money by next spring, but the occupancy of those homes is not required to happen by the expenditure deadline. In fact, we know that it's going to take longer than that for a lot of houses or apartments to be occupied. So if you want to go back and review the material that we went over in a webinar a couple months ago called Life After Deadlines, it points out that there is an expenditure deadline, which is strictly a money deadline, and then there is a period after that in which you complete the projects, occupy the units, get everything in place, and that when you have all your units occupied and can show that you've met a national objective with every activity, then you're in a position to close out. But there is no set deadline for that event to happen. So if you just finished spending money on a 99-unit apartment project and it takes you 12 months to lease that thing up, then that's what it's going to take, and you're going to be okay.
Okay. And that's all we have in queue right now, John.
Okay, so let me mention that we are not announcing people's names or last names or locations because we don't want to make you overly concerned about expressing your situation. So I think you can feel that there's some comfort in that semi-anonymity, and so that's what we've been trying to do, just so that you understand that. Now,
it does look like we have one hand raised, Jacob.
Yeah, it looks like Valerie has a question. Valerie, your phone line is now unmuted.
Okay, I have a property that we purchased using Activity C, our land banking funds. It was actually purchased by our land bank authority from an REO lender. The city obtained a lender's title policy in the amount of the acquisition price. Subsequently, there has been a claim filed against the property from the previous owner of the land. The property has flipped several times since evidently this man owned a portion of the land, but when we bought it from the bank, it was an actual house. The title company basically is working out the settlement, but they're going to actually be issuing the city a check for the value of the lender's title policy. And so our question is, how do we count those funds? Is it program income? Is it return of grant funds? What do we do with the money that's coming back to us from the title company?
What money did you use to purchase that lender's title policy?
It was purchased with Activity C.
With NSP funds?
Yes.
Yeah, so any money you get back from the title company will just be program income, treated as program income.
Okay, so our second part of that question is, now that there's a cloud on the title, because we're getting our money back, but that person who had a partial ownership in the land, he'll still have partial ownership. So can we pay off his interest in the property so that we can now own it free and clear? And is that an eligible expense under NSP?
Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't negotiate something and clear that up. You know, as long as the price is reasonable and you'll get a quiet title or something like that to end the dispute. Yeah, that's fine. I would just clarify that I think if you get the money back, it's actually something called an applicable credit, and so the only difference, it works just like program income, but you don't get to take 10% of it as general administrative fee because it's basically a refund of something that
an expenditure.
made. So, like sometimes people will have extra money left in at closing, and they'll get a couple $1,000s back. That's an applicable credit. Again, it works just like program income. It goes into your account, gets spent first. You just can't take your 10%.
Okay. And then as far as documenting it in the files?
Yeah, I would just write up something, a one-page thing of this kind of conversation. Or maybe you could just go to the transcripts when they're published in a couple of weeks and clip that out and stick it in your file, and it'll even be easier.
Okay. I have a subsequent question if there's nobody else with their hand raised.
Go for it. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Is anybody utilizing any of their NSP3 funds strictly under Activity E redevelopment and not utilizing any of it for Activity B acquisition, rehab, disposition?
I don't think I know them all well enough to say that. I wouldn't be surprised, though. Why do you ask?
We are having a severe problem in just finding foreclosed properties.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, there's a couple of ways to think about that. One is, is your target area the right target area now? I mean, maybe things have changed since you put it together, and you've got foreclosures, but they're a mile away or something. So you could amend your program. There's nothing wrong with using just Activity E or use E, though. I mean, it's a little bit easier.
For legal reasons, you may have a number of properties that are bringing down the neighborhood, but don't quite fit into our definition of foreclosed or abandoned. Right. So it may be better to work under E, and there's nothing that would disallow that.
No.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You still got you still got the 25% set aside for
right.
low income, but
yeah.
Most people I think are using E for that anyway. A good portion of them. So.
Okay, great. That's perfect.
Barrier.
Okay, there's a couple. Jacob, there's a couple others with their hands raised.
Yes, let's go ahead and go with Steve. Steve, your phone line is now unmuted.
All right, thanks a lot. We're curious about the our deadline for NSP1 is March 19th of 2013. And we're curious if there's some kind of grace period for invoicing or whatnot after that date. In other words, if you processing loan draw requests that are already in hand and whatnot, is there some kind of period of time during which we can submit those and still get them paid?
Yes, we did that with NSP2 at the 50% expenditure deadline.
And the obligation deadline.
Yeah. So the way the expenditures work is that you can actually, if you're on an accrual basis of accounting, you might get an invoice, the day before the deadline. That actually would count as an expenditure, but then you need to actually make the expenditure. So we allowed a 30-day period for those kind of corrections. Now, the 30 days was not a delay in the deadline date. It was just it's just to allow you to report what you actually had expended as of the deadline date.
Right.
So the 30 days. No, go ahead.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and during that 30 days, to the extent there's any paperwork that you need to get cleaned up, you talk about invoicing, right? That's what can be can be done during that time, And as we get closer, there'll be specific guidance that we'll be coming out with.
Yeah.
All right, great, thanks.
More hands?
There is.
And yes, it looks like we have Lori here. Lori, your phone line is now unmuted.
Hi, my question is about combining funds when purchasing a project. let's just say it's a multifamily, or not even multifamily, just a single-family home, and I combine different programs. I might have used CDBG, NSP, and let's say SHIP, some other funding source. There's nothing that says that I can't do that, of course, as long as the activities are the same and I'm complying with each program. But when I've purchased the property, let's say rehabbed it, and I go to sell it, and then let's say for CDBG you have to be 80% and below. The person, maybe it's 120%. So I'm going to now take that funding out. Although there's nowhere that I can see that says you can't do that, and although it might be complex because now you're canceling vouchers and moving things away, is there somewhere you can refer me to that if I was trying to say this is yes you can do this, no you can't do this, or just your thoughts and feelings of doing that?
Yeah. The closest guidance I think we have out on this, Lori, is in the home and NSP guidance that came out last fall, maybe, we looked just at combining home funds and NSP funds, and it can be kind of complicated, and you can get into it and realize, geez, this isn't working with two funding sources. So I don't think there's anything that would prohibit you from undoing that. I don't know that there is anything specific that says exactly that. It's some extra work, but if you haven't been able to foresee the problem that you would get into by doing that, or you just can't find a buyer under 80%, for example, and you want to back out the CDBG funds or what have you, I just think the only real negative on that is if it's going to sort of mess up your expenditures, slow them down a little bit for however much you had in there. So. Having gone through that guidebook a number of times while we were writing it, I got to say it just seemed more and more complicated to do that, because then you got to worry about, are you over subsidizing and all these other things. So we've had some cases in other places where we've had 2 or 3 or 4 sources of funds, and it gets pretty. It's pretty complicated. So I think you can get out of it. You can back out of it, and that might be the smartest thing. And even if it's a little harder sometimes. So if you need something from us in writing, send something into the Ask a Question line or to one of us, and we'll try to get you something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it looks like we do have a couple handwritten questions. Ashley is asking, for demolition projects, can NSP3 funds be used to pay liens or other assessments that are currently against the property?
For demolition, so
that's not a demolition activity. Paying the lien is not the demolition activity. If you're acquiring the property for the purpose of demolishing it, then as part of the acquisition, you can pay off the lien, right? Assuming it's reasonable and it's all within the appraised value and whatnot. But that paying of the lien would not be classified under demolition.
Yeah, that'd be part of the acquisition. And I don't know why you'd want to pay a lien if you weren't acquiring it. So if that doesn't answer your question, why don't you send in another follow-up and we'll try to pin it down.
Okay. Manny is asking, does anyone hear any talk about NSP4?
No. Here's the talk about NSP4. We have currently earned, between NSP1 and 2 primarily, over $670 million worth of program income. That's NSP4. We think that number will go up to, that's around 10% of the total grants that we've made. We believe that number is going to go up to 30%, maybe higher, so that you could be looking at $2 billion or more in funds that comes back to the program, and that is, I think, your surest bet for an NSP4. The next closest thing is a program called Project Rebuild, which was proposed by the in the President's Jobs Bill last September. It was included in this year's budget It has been introduced in both the House and the Senate, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So I don't know, I think the future of this is all bound up in what happens in this coming election, and obviously nobody knows what's going to come out there. So I think the bird in the hand is your own sources of program income and the way that you structure your program in a way that maximizes the amount of money that comes back to you. Yeah. Now you don't always have that luxury. If you're in a Rust Belt city and you're doing a lot of demolition, that's not coming back to you right away. But for those places that have acquisition, rehab, resale, we're seeing some pretty impressive numbers already of program income being generated. Certainly, we hope that there is more funding, but it's just really impossible to predict at this point.
Okay. Scott submitted a question. We're a primary recipient of NSP2 funds, and we allow our consortium partners to keep their program income. Once program income is going through a second revolution, are those funds still program income?
Yeah. So we have in fact gotten our closeout notice ready to go into departmental circulation for review by our attorneys and other divisions at HUD, as well as by the Office of Management and Budget. Hopefully by sometime next month we will be able to sort of talk more openly about the details of that. But in a nutshell, it's all regular NSP funding up until the grant closeout. So that money could come back 10 times, well, 4 times, let's say, and it's still NSP, all the regular NSP rules, and then when the grant closes out, this might change slightly for certain nonprofits, but for almost everybody else, it's going to continue to be NSP funding. So it'll have NSP eligibility. So So I think, unless you're in a very small handful of NSP2 grantees that don't have any entitlement, cities or states as members, you will continue to have the program income will continue to look just like NSP funds.
Okay. Jacob, it looks like we may have a couple of questions.
Yeah, it looks like we have Jay that wants to ask a question. Jay, your phone line is now unmuted.
Hi, thank you. We had a question regarding developer had a claim under his warranty with the contractor. The contractor did not respond. This was during the warranty period, and so they would like to go ahead and hire an outside firm to come in and make those repairs. And I was just trying to see if those costs would be eligible under the rehab.
What kind of repairs were they? Was it construction defects or what?
Construction defects, correct.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's eligible, but you really need to get reimbursed because typically you shouldn't be paying for that same work twice. So if you believe you're going to get the money back and then you can reimburse the program, you could go ahead and get the work done. But ultimately, if you don't get that money back, you're going to have to reimburse that second expenditure because you paid twice for the same thing.
Well, we are aware of that, and so actually this falls during the retainage period, and so the developer will be making a claim to reduce the retainage draw.
Okay,
by that.
So you still got some leverage on them.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, but you're going to have to reimburse the program with that money then, so that you in effect you've only spent it once. But it sounds like you're in a pretty good position to move on.
I'm sorry, I don't
understand. As long as you realize you can only pay for it once, it doesn't matter the various hands that the funds have to move through in order to achieve that.
So, but if the developer owes the contractor $10 in retainage, and this repair costs $2, so he only pays him $8 in retainage, is that okay?
Right. Yeah,
Yep.
but then the other $2 is going to go to reimburse the program for the shoddy work.
So they're going to have to pay.
No, the $2 is going to pay to fix the defects, right?
the $2 we pay to fix the defects today, tomorrow we'll look at reimbursing the developer for the balance, the $8 owed on the retainage.
Right. So
in effect, we've never paid more than the full amount of that contract.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Yeah, that's good. And let me clarify, though, that there are some circumstances that we've seen where an unexpected event, a problem occurs after the rehab is complete that was not able to be anticipated by anybody. A sewer line collapses, for example, that services the house. And so it's nobody's fault, but you're still, generally up to 1 year, we are willing to allow those kind of additional
unforeseen
repairs to be made that were nobody's fault,
right.
that don't have to be reimbursed by anybody. But we don't want to put somebody in a house and then have their sewer backing up 2 months after they moved in. So, but when it's a contractor problem, then the contractor needs to, in effect, reimburse the program for the cost of the improvements.
Right.
Okay. I'm not sure if Lori has another question. Jacob, if you could possibly check. Otherwise, once you've asked your question verbally, if you could select that hand icon so we can take you out of the queue. Thank you. But it does look like Lori deselected, so we do have a question that was written in. This one comes from Joni, and the question is there anything you can do to persuade the state of North Carolina to allow subrecipients to keep program income after closeout? We are a Habitat affiliate that puts our program income back into eligible uses, but the state continues to say we must pay it back.
No, we can't help you on that one. States have the right to make these kind of decisions. Well, entitlement cities do as well, and counties. So that is not something that we interfere in. That's something that's between the grantee and the subrecipients. Particularly in the state program, we have to adhere to something called maximum feasible deference, which is a term that's been around for over 30 years, which means that, unless there's some overwhelming reason to get involved, that we will defer to the state's decisions on these kind of matters.
Okay, and I think that our queue is clear unless Jay has another follow-up question. Jacob, if you could possibly check, or Jay, if you could just deselect your hand icon, that would be appreciated.
Looks like we do have a question here from Leslie, though. Leslie, your phone line is now unmuted.
Hello. I wanted some clarification on multifamily projects that are up and running that are having a difficult time because they are targeting the low-income set-aside residents, and they would like to establish a operating reserve, but they don't have enough cash flow to even do that. Can NSP funds be brought back into a project under eligible use B for that purpose? Would be the first part. The second part is if they do have any funds that they can generate, can they establish an operating reserve that is part of their pro forma operating budget and not have to report that as program income at the end of the year?
Well, on the second question, yes, you can establish reasonable reserves from cash flow if you have cash flow. Typically, we see those going into replacement reserves, but the more I've looked at this, the less distinction there seems to be between replacement reserves and operating deficit reserves when all is said and done. Our recent policy allows grantees to set up operating deficit reserves at the beginning of the project. I don't think there's any real prohibition against doing it retroactively, although I would really be careful about how you do the underwriting to ensure that you're really doing it properly. And the reason is not so much that you I mean, we don't want these projects going down, but much more so, we'd rather not see them going up if they can't sustain themselves in the first place. So, do we want to have a project that's been built and is losing money? No. I'd like to look at the specifics of that and maybe have somebody make sure that that the underwriting is done properly. And I don't believe there's any real prohibition in the way that we've set up the operating deficit reserve allowance. I don't think there's any prohibition against doing it retroactively. It's much better to step back from a project that looks like it's got large negative cash flows. There's just some projects that there's not enough
Probably
money
shouldn't be built.
that you just can't have a big enough operating deficit escrow to be comfortable. So those are the projects you want to back away from. But I think if there's if you can see that there's a reasonable basis to believe that the project can go positive in terms of cash flow. Hopefully, maybe some of the problem initially is just the lease up. So you really should have a lease up reserve. That seems supportable. If it's negative numbers for the next 20 years, I'm not really sure how we deal with that. But let's take a look at the specifics and see if we can make it work.
Okay, there was a question submitted by Deborah, and her question, she's had problems getting into the webinar, so she doesn't know if program income has been discussed. But her question is there a definitive answer as to what is to happen with program income at the end of the grant period?
Well, I think the most definitive answer until we publish the closeout notice is that it will remain program income without question up until closeout, and almost undoubtedly after closeout it will operate like program income for NSP. The only thing that we're talking about changing post closeout is that you cannot acquire new land bank properties, and you will most likely not have to do the 25% set aside. Although we'll encourage that, won't be a requirement because the cash flows are so irregular. But everything else about NSP will pretty much continue to be like NSP. So you'll be able to do new construction. You'll be able to go up to 120% of median income for families, and in every way it will function as a complement to CDBG programs. So that's kind of the short answer, is just keep thinking about revenues continuing to be program income for the indefinite future.
Okay. I have a question from Chris. Under Use B, can a donated house which is not habitable be demolished and rebuilt under the definition of reconstruction being the same as rehabilitation if the new house is built on the same lot and the number of units does not change?
It's roughly the same footprint, then
that's what reconstruction is considered. So the answer is yes, you can do that. It's also allowable to, once you've done the demolition, you've got a vacant piece of property, which means that you could consider that to be eligible use E, and then you could do new construction, which is allowed under eligible use E. And the advantage to that would be that you would not be constrained by, the approximate original footprint,
right,
and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure if this is actually the reason, but I think in the past reconstruction has been allowed under CDBG because you can't do new construction
unless you're a CBDO.
Yeah. So here you have the option to do new construction with more flexibility. So I'm not suggesting that you should take it in all cases, but it is there for you. So
there's no benefit to calling it reconstruction when you can do it as new construction.
Right. You just have more flexibility that way. I just want to point that out. But the original question is you can do what you were asking.
Okay. Cisco is asking, what steps are required to get startup funds for rehabs, purchase, or repair?
startup funds. So I'm not exactly sure who's starting up what, but let's say you're let's say you've got a nonprofit development company that's just getting into the NSP program. You could, get a sub-grant, become a sub-recipient to a city or a county or a state, and put together a program in which you're acquiring and rehabbing and reselling houses. There are a certain amount of activity delivery costs or project admin type of costs, as well as, in some cases, some general administrative costs that can be covered for subrecipients. But it's not like there's a grant for you to go out and sort of test the market and see how it works. Typically, the projects that we've seen are pretty much activity-driven. They are driven by the real estate. They are driven by the specific opportunities in a given neighborhood, rather than sort of an open-ended startup kind of scenario. So you might need to give me a little more information about what you have in mind for startups.
Okay, and at the moment it looks like our queue is empty. Again, to ask a verbal question, select the hand icon, and we'll be glad to unmute your line and have you ask the question, or to submit a question and submit it through the Q&A box and address it to all panelists.
I did want to make a brief announcement while we're here. We just confirmed a new DRGR training for Orlando, Florida, and that'll be offered, I think it's the second week of September, the 11th and 12th, I believe. And we should have registration information and a listserv announcement going out probably tomorrow. So, for those of you who may have missed out on one of the other DRGR trainings, should certainly try to sign up for this one.
Right. Yeah, I think that we were just talking yesterday with Yolanda and Jesse about, what our priorities are going to be over the next few months, and very clearly our priorities are going to be focusing on getting all of you over the line successfully onto the other side of the expenditure deadline. As a result, we probably will be trimming back the number of clinics. I mean, we don't have any more clinics planned, but training sessions and even webinars to some extent, so that everybody can focus on the work in front of them. So all the more reason to take advantage of these sessions when you can. I know that we had a lot of interest that we couldn't meet all the needs in Florida, so those DRGR sessions are useful, but they're limited to about 30 people because it's a computer class. So,
still empty queues, John and David.
All right. Well, one other thing that we've been finishing up and should be launching pretty soon is a rewrite of our frequently asked questions into a more standard FAQ kind of format, where in the past we have, it's kind of posted all the questions and all the answers that we've been getting, the sort of routine ones or the more frequent ones. Some of those ended up being highly specialized and not all that frequent. And so we are trying to get back to something that's a little more broadly useful, and then have people go to policy alerts, which are a much more detailed and hopefully comprehensive way of approaching problems. The FAQs really should not be the first place that people look for information, or if they are the first place, we will then refer you to other documents that we have up, because you just can't get into all the subtleties and the variations that are possible in one a single question and answer kind of format. So we have gotten through, I think, I've gotten a couple of more. We're kind of doing a double and triple review to make sure that we're straight on these, and ICF's been doing the originals, and then we've been reviewing them here, and I think we're pretty close to having them all done, and then we'll be able to send them back out and get them formatted and posted. We've told you this before. I know that there are people who are very attached to those original FAQs, and they will still be available as a PDF on a file, and certainly, we will get more questions that we want to add to the mix over time, but I think it'll still, even if we're adding questions, we will be going from the general to the specific rather than from the specific to the specific to the specific, and leaving a lot of gaps in between. So at the same time, we get a lot of questions through the Ask a Question box, and we've been getting the replies out pretty quickly. We review those every month. We do a sample of the questions that have been answered by our consultants. Typically, we get the ones that nobody's 100% sure about, so we handle those. That's maybe 4 to 6 questions a week or something like that. So that process continues to be available to you to answer specific questions. You can always go to your field office. You can write into us here at headquarters. We're trying to be available in as many ways as possible so that you can get what you need. Do we have another question up here, I think?
We do. We actually have two. Valerie is asking, can NSP funds be used to pay the city's vacant housing registration fee for NSP properties that are land banked, under construction, and on the open market? The city ordinance requires all vacant houses to pay the annual fee in an annual fee that is unoccupied.
Yeah, typically those kinds of things, if they're imposed uniformly on all properties, property taxes, you've got utilities perhaps for land bank properties. Those are legitimate disposition and maintenance expenses. You can't add those to the price of the property as far as total development costs, but you can pay them directly as part of disposition, which is part of the land bank eligible use C. So, it's just that, if somebody suddenly just decides to impose a fee on NSP properties, that we're going to have a problem. But these kind of things are fairly common and acceptable.
Okay. Jacob, it looks like there's a hand raised for a verbal question.
Okay, yeah, it looks like we have Lori again. Lori, your phone line is now unmuted.
Hi. I noticed that there's a webinar for the revolving loan fund for NSP2. Is there going to be one for NSP1, or could the NSP1 and 3 grantees listen as well? Would it be the same?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, Lori, and the answer is everybody's welcome to listen to that. The real impetus for the revolving funds originally was a concern from the NSP2 program that any funds left in the line of credit, even if the expenditures had been achieved, you could still, if you have program income, you might still have money left in your line of credit, and there was some concern that those funds would be swept up. We have established that there really is no threat there in that regard. Those funds are safe until 2015. On the other hand, there are communities that are interested in revolving funds, and we are also looking at subrecipient agreements as a way to accomplish the same kind of thing. So anybody who is interested in creating a vehicle that would allow you to segregate funds for a certain type of use, maybe acquisition, rehab, and resale, for example, that would fund itself and not be and not pull funds from other projects or have other projects pull from it, should listen in next week. So, but if your only motivation is fear, please take a deep breath and realize that we've even got this legal opinion from our Chief Financial Officer's office. So we're feeling about 99.9% sure that those funds are. You don't have to set up a revolving fund just to protect your funds from being recaptured. That's not from being swept up. That's not a threat.
Okay, thank you.
but it is open to anybody.
There's a question written in from Jennifer, and her question is, can you discuss how resale and or recapture applies to loan loss reserves utilizing NSP? AHRs are placed on these properties, but if the borrower sells during or even after the affordability period, doesn't the full reserve become program income?
So a loan loss reserve is established as basically an insurance policy, and the way they typically work is that you will analyze the mortgage default rate in your community over the last 5 years or 10 years or something, and say that on average loans in this range of values and these kinds of customers have a 10% default rate. So when you make a loan, a bank makes a loan, and you for the mortgage, you insure that by putting a 10% of the amount into a reserve fund, which becomes basically a pool that the bank can go to, so that when the 1 out of 10 loans does default, they can reimburse themselves. If that does not happen for any reason, and the funds are not used, then they would become program income. Now that could be 15 years from now, so you'd have to have some provision for that. I mean, in a sort of perfect world, you would end up the term of these mortgages, let's say, is 30 years. At the end of 30 years, you would have zero left in your loss reserve fund. That never works out that perfectly. So, yeah. So again, I don't know. It could be an applicable credit as well. I mean, it pretty much works like program income, as we said before. But those would then revert to the program if they're not used. But my sense is that my experience with this is that you don't really get those funds back. I mean, the pool stays in place until the last mortgage is repaid. So you've always got that reserve fund for the lender. It doesn't get you don't get refunds out of it when a loan pays off.
But now the second part of it is always how that intermingles with the resale recapture provisions.
Yeah, I don't see how that would affect it. I mean, the loss reserve is something that's there to induce a private lender to put a first mortgage on a property, a private first mortgage. How you structure the affordability period is really up to you, and the affordability period is based on a direct subsidy, and I don't think this is not a direct subsidy. You would have probably a different amount of money that would be a direct subsidy, and that would operate independent of the loss reserve. But I'm making a number of assumptions here, so if you would care to call in and clarify or write back in and straighten us out, that would be good.
Okay, there's another question. Cisco is trying to clarify. If you have a property duplex and you want to rehab for rental or resale, can the repairs be financed through this program?
Yes, they can, but you need some sort of a relationship with the grantee. So if you're a private company or a private nonprofit or something like that, you have to apply to or negotiate with, or however it's set up. Usually communities will do a request for proposals or request for qualifications for people to participate in a program or to bring a property into it. If you just have a property and you're looking for money to fix it up, then you need to contact your city or your county or wherever you're located and see if they have the funds, see if you're in the target area, and see if they have a program that's set up in a way that would work with you. There's a lot of variations, so it's a little bit hard for me to describe all of them, but it really comes down to calling up City Hall or the county staff, the housing department, or whoever it is, and saying, what do you have? Go online, get the website, get the contact information, You can get that from our resource exchange as well, the names and numbers of the people who are responsible for this program, and find out what they're doing. Many cases, the funds are already committed, but as I said before, we're seeing a lot of program income, and so there are, at least in some areas, there are funds coming back in and still available for fixing up houses.
Okay. There's another one in the queue. Chris is asking, can an in-house real estate broker charge a commission on the sale side if they are unable to earn a fee on the acquisition from First Look Properties and do not charge time to the property because of the fear of double dipping?
Well,
they wouldn't charge a commission if they're in. Wait a second. Where did we go with them?
No, we've said no.
At cost.
Yeah, you can only, if you're in-house, you can only charge costs. So you can only charge direct costs. I mean, the concern really is with the fee on the in-house real estate agent or broker or whatever, because if they are a member of the grantee or a staff member of the grantee, they are only allowed to charge direct costs. And we've been pretty consistent on that from the beginning.
Okay. And right now the queue is empty. So again, if you have a verbal question and you select your hand icon, we'll put you into the queue and unmute your line so that you can ask your question. Or submit a question through the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side and address that to all panelists.
We should have prepared some jokes. Okay, so David's going to do a little dance right now, and I'll describe it to you. So we do read the comments that you send in, and I don't know who made the comment that they felt that these Q&A sessions were like a dose of vitamins, but we appreciate that. We're not sure that that's actually true, but the session coming up. Yeah, David mentioned that we will be down at the Florida Housing Coalition's annual meeting on September, well, theirs is the 9th to the 12th. We'll be there the 11th and 12th with several workshops and then sort of a mini clinic on the morning of the 12th. That's actually the same days as the DRGR training as well. So, and then we're all going to Harry Potter World because every time we come back from Orlando, Yolanda says, "Did you guys go to Harry Potter World?" So that's where we're going to be on Wednesday afternoon, I think. So.
Perfect. Well, you can wear your
John?
sporting.
Yes.
I just want to mention that we are having a revolving loan funds webinar next Tuesday, and then we're going to have a little bit of a break for the summer, and we'll be getting back to you guys after Labor Day. So I know we're cutting back on webinars, but we are not stopping webinars, so we'll have some in mid-September.
Right. That's our webinar master, Hunter Kurtz. That's good. We sort of brought up the one next week indirectly, but the revolving funds and / subrecipient agreements, how to stretch your NSP dollars is coming up next Tuesday, the week from today. And then, we're kind of heading into the Labor Day break, and so we'll be getting more. So is Jennifer calling to clarify some additional information?
It looks like it. She's clarifying. She says, that is correct. NSP is not funding the acquisition per se, only the LLR percentage associated with that loan. The affordability period is based minimally upon the amount NSP allocated to the reserve percentage per loan. It sounds like the recapture resale does not apply in cases of LLR.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think the question is, how does it apply? I mean, it's not really
There's not a direct relationship between the resale recapture and an LLR. I guess the issue is, if you have a property that had an affordability period that, I guess, had some type of loan guarantee attached to it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's in my mind, it's not a direct subsidy because the buyer isn't really, sort of personally benefiting from that. I mean, they might you could say they're benefiting to the extent that they're getting a loan that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, but they're not getting the house for 10% less. If you're putting 10% into that loss reserve, that's generating funds. On the other hand, I mean, it seems to me like we've got affordability restrictions, or you have to meet continued affordability standards for all units. So to me, the question is, well, how would you do that strictly with a loss reserve? To me, it comes kind of closest to being a development subsidy, because it's, you could say it's sort of necessary to make the transaction work, but it's not directly benefiting the buyer. Then you're getting into a much more complicated and long-term type of continued affordability scenario than most people are willing to get into. So your option in that case, I mean, if you're doing development subsidy only, you are required to do resale, and that's complicated, and it can be a hard sell. You are allowed in those circumstances, though, to make a modest direct subsidy to the family and then base a recapture off of that amount. That is perfectly legitimate, and people do it all the time. That's probably the way I'd go in the case that you're talking about. But you may want to just send that in, and we could kick that around, because I don't recall that we've run into that. There aren't all that many loss reserve funds out there, so I don't know. I'm not sure if any of them are purely loss reserve, but it's a good question.
Okay, and our queue is currently empty if someone would like to submit a question or ask a question. And it looks like we have a hand raised. Jacob?
Okay, let's go ahead and go with Chris. Your line is now unmuted.
Okay. Here's a scenario, which I guess happens in a lot of places around the country. You have a single-family acquisition rehab resale program, and you have a Habitat affiliate that, because of their way of operation, it really lends itself to more of a resale approach. Then you also have another developer that's a non-Habitat developer who would rather use in a recapture approach. A question was sent in, and it was answered that you could split up. You could have two separate programs, one for the Habitat type program that uses a resale approach, and one for the non-Habitat single-family home ownership program that uses a recapture approach, because the home regulations say you can't have both recapture and resale in the same program. So my question, one, is to confirm that is so, and two, would anything have to be done in the action plan to separate the programs as a Habitat program versus a non-Habitat program? And I'm just labeling it that way for the sake of clarity.
I think the issue is units. When you talk about this Habitat and non-Habitat developers, are they both working on the same unit?
No, they're working in the same program. The program is a single-family home ownership program.
Then okay, then that's fine.
We don't see. I mean, as long as they're treated consistently within. I mean, I would say that the Habitat program is a program, and so if everybody should do the same thing in that program. That doesn't mean that another nonprofit or a for-profit would have to operate it exactly that way. But within their program, everyone should be treated uniformly. But I don't think, between programs there doesn't have to be consistency. Even Habitat. I mean, some of them want to treat it as a recapture, whereas it really does, as you say, really function more like a resale program. So.
Right. And would you need to do anything in the action plan to separate the activities or anything?
No. It's the same activities. It's just a contractual difference.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to describe how you're going to meet your continued affordability requirements, and most people say most grantees will use the the home standards, and either of those approaches is acceptable in the home program. So I don't see why you would need to do anything as far as the application itself or any kind of amendment or anything.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, Chris.
Okay. Brenda has submitted a written question, and she is asking, would you please discuss the Section 3 minimum numerical goals set forth in 24 CFR Part 135.30? Does the 10% award requirement to Section 3 businesses apply to all recipients?
I'd really like to refer you to the handbook that we developed for the Section 3 program, because honestly, off the top of my head, I can't quote it to you. So, there's a kind of a two-step process. One is whether your activity is over $200,000, and then whether your contracts are over $100,000. And I can never keep it straight. So rather than misquoting that, if you go into our resource exchange and look for the policy or the guidance that actually Cloudburst developed, and it's a very nice little handbook. It's all laid out in there. We follow the same rules that the home program has followed for these many years, and I think an especially nice feature of the guidance is that at the back there's 4 different case studies from different types of grantees. There's a state, there's a nonprofit, there's a city, there's a county. So that is a much better resource, and it's correct in there. And I would, even if I were doing my best, to probably misquote it. So.
Okay, and again, the queue is empty. So if you have a verbal question, you would just raise your hand using the hand icon. We'll put you into queue. Or to submit a written question, to do so through the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side and address it to all panelists.
All right.
And
what time is it?
About 3:15.
Yeah.
Well, we had a pretty good turnout today with over 100 people, so that's we're always pleased with that. I don't know that we've got any other tidbits that we can throw at you, and I'm sure you're anxious to get back and spend your money before next February or March.
There's one more here, Jacob. Kyle?
Kyle, your line is now unmuted.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question as it relates to a previous webinar that was done, specifically as it relates to original grant amounts, then the program income that you will collect over the 4 years. The question, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, if our amount was $4.6 million, and we spent $4.6 million between the PI and the original grant, does the everything above that 4.6 then falls into the stuff that we can spend after our expenditure deadline? Is that correct?
Right. Exactly. The expenditure requirement is an amount equal to your original grant, and that would include program income. That's always been true for NSP1. It was not originally true for NSP2, but we fixed it, and it's true for NSP3. So that's why you might end up with funds left in your line of credit, because you didn't, you were doing the right thing and spending program income first. And so, in NSP1 and 3, those programs are called no-year money, which means there's no expiration date on them. For a while, we thought NSP2 was going to have an expiration date of the end of next September. So, you have basically an indefinite amount of time to spend that. You will probably need to spend that down to 0 or close to 0 in order to close out your grant. But you are perfectly in good shape if you've spent the $4.6 million and then you still got something left in your line of credit. There is no explicit deadline for that.
And after the expenditure deadline, the 4.6 or whatever we have left over at that point, is it all treated the same, or do we still continue to spend PI first, and then, or does it even matter?
Well, you would still continue to spend PI first, and so everything is, after the expenditure deadline, nothing changes, basically. You are still in NSP land, and all the rules apply, and all the same procedures apply as they ever have. So if you're in a place where you've got enough program income, and it keeps coming in, then it's going to make closing it out a little bit dicier. You may want to look at you may want to listen in next Tuesday to the revolving fund discussion to think about how you could divert some of that program income into a separate fund, and then only those activities can use that fund, those monies. And then if you have any other activity, that you can go to the line of credit for those, so that you can empty that thing out. That's really one sort of very specific advantage of having a revolving fund. Or in some cases you might be able to accomplish the same objective through a subrecipient agreement. But there are going to be cases where maybe not right away, but down the line you might want to set one of those up so that you can make sure you're getting through that line of credit and can close out the grant. Okay, and then just to clarify, I had the question previous about the 50% AMI, meeting that requirement, and that all is handled at closeout as well. Right. Based on what I was reading there. Okay, great. Yes, you have to meet you have to show that you've met a national objective with every activity. You have to show that you've allocated at least 25% of your grant to people below 50% of area median income. All those requirements will have to be satisfied before you can close the grant out.
Right.
Great.
John, we did have a question. Deborah is asking if you could repeat the question that Kyle just asked.
Yes, the question was if they have an NSP grant of about $4.6 million, they have received program income, and they have spent program income and grant funds in an amount equal to the $4.6 million, but because they spent the program income first, as they're required to do, they still have money left in their line of credit. And so the concern is, is that okay? Am I going to lose that money? And the answer is no. You're not going to lose that money. That money is available to you indefinitely. You may want to start thinking about shunting some of it into a separate account so that you can take that line of credit down to zero and close your grant out at some point. But we anticipate that it's going to be at least a year, probably 2 years for many grantees before they're ready to close the grants. But all you have to spend is an amount equal to your grant amount, and that can include program income because of the way that requirement is. Otherwise you'd be losing money.
Okay. And she, I guess to clarify, is writing program income and award amount spent equals grant award with some funds remaining equals line of credit.
Right. You'll have funds left in the line of credit in the amount of the program income that you spent prior to spending grant funds directly out of the line of credit. But as long as the total that you spent, whatever the source, is equal to your grant amount, then you have met your expenditure requirement.
Okay. Another question written in. Marty is asking or requesting, I guess, to do a webinar on tenant file compliance.
File compliance, like what the tenant. Oh, the documents that you should have in your files for a tenant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty good, and that reminds me that we are closer and closer to an online income verification tool, and that could actually, satisfy some of those requirements, or at least it'll, I think, prompt everybody to ask for the right questions. But yeah, that's a good point, Hunter. I'm sure you've taken notes on that. There's probably a whole range. Well, I think once we get that income verification tool up and running, and this will be something that will apply for the home program and
for all CPD.
All CPD programs, so that everybody who's working with any of our programs can use it, depending on the source of funds. Probably when that becomes available in a couple of months, we can put up a a webinar to take people through that and also talk about how the accompanying documentation ought to work. So good suggestion.
Okay, and it looks like our queue is empty. So if there are any other verbal questions, to raise your hand or to submit the questions through the written box. So we make sure that we get those in before the end of time.
Okay. Well, we don't want dead air, do we? That's not good.
No, and I don't hear David doing the soft shoe dance either.
It's that rug on the floor. You can barely hear it, but I can. You hear that?
All right, John. Don't beat a dead horse.
All right. Well, I think we've worn everybody out. So we appreciate your chiming in with us and checking in, and keep us in touch with your needs. We really have the ability to help with just about any problem or concern, but only if we know about it. So please let us know or call your local office and tell them that you need a little help. No request is too small, and so we really encourage you to do that. We certainly don't. We see asking for help as a sign of strength because you're good enough to know that you need some help. It's not a sign of weakness. We are certainly not holding it against anybody. So please do take advantage of it, and then we'll see you, I guess, next Tuesday for our revolving fund webinar.
Yes, we will.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, thank you. Just to remind everyone, there will be a recording and the transcript will be available on the Resource Exchange in the next few days. So if anyone wanted to go back and review the answers given. So otherwise, have a great afternoon, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, everybody.